answer. Ooh, there we go. Now we're recording. Perfect. Thank you, Morgan. We will be asking separate questions, but I would love to hear, Erin, I'll pass it back to you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the history of going from corporate to starting your own company and a little bit of how that evolution came about?
Yeah. For me, I feel like it was less of an evolution and more of like a jumping both feet in. So I had a very standard, I don't even want to say corporate 9 to 5 because it was really like a 8 to 7, 8 to 8, Monday to Friday, and sometimes a little bit on weekends. Anybody who's listening in the corporate world and identifies with that, I feel you, I've been there. And for me in merchandising, what was really interesting in buying, so for those of you who aren't familiar with that career path, anytime that you walk into a store and you see items there, there's someone in the position called the buyer who's meeting with those brands, negotiating, developing an assortment, creating every experience that you're seeing in the store. And that's what I was doing at Ross and Burlington stores. So for me, I had spent 10 years working directly with entrepreneurs. So every brand that I was working with directly had a CEO or someone who had taken the plunge. So I didn't necessarily kind of dip one foot in and kind of like have side hustles and kind of get my feet wet. For me, I had kind of spent years watching all these other people do it and do it really successfully, some not so successfully. And something that was really central to me, which I feel like we'll probably talk about later, was having great relationships and building your network. So I was able to kind of network and get coffees with these people who had started companies that I was fascinated by and just say, how did you get here? Like, what was your tipping point? And for me, that tipping point came after watching other people do it for 10 years, looking around. And for me, the season of life that I was in, I knew that I kind of wanted to start a family. For any moms out there, I have a 6 month old currently watching the monitor, praying that he stays asleep while we are doing this webinar. And I just knew what my life was going to look like if I stayed the corporate track. I would probably keep working the same hours, potentially keep scaling the corporate ladder. And I wanted more for myself. I wanted more flexibility. And I always had this burning passion to do something and do something differently. And I kind of talked with my husband. We were very planful about it, both financially and timing wise. And in November of 2022, I quit my corporate job at Burlington, where I was overseeing the beauty department. I had 9 direct reports, was really busy, and really was just kind of had enough. Took a trip to Morocco, ended up meeting my weavers and seeing these beautiful rugs, and dove 2 feet in. And that's the quickest version I can give.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of sub stories to that. And what really stands out to me, Erin, is there's a couple things. I think one is that for you, it was a pull towards the possibility. It was not necessarily, let me get away from something that's bad or broken. It was, you knew that there was something different that you sought in your life, in your career. And then you happened to be surrounded by a bunch of amazing examples of people doing the thing that you wanted to do. And I think the other piece that really stands out to me is it's not like you said, okay, let me sit down with these people and learn what to do. Uh, it sounds like you were really able to follow your curiosity and casually meet with people, let that relationship building be some of the pieces that you eventually cultivated into creating your business.
Mhm.
But retroactively looking back, it all came from like, I wonder how they're doing it, or what, why are they doing it and how did they do it? And so it sounds like that was a really important part of your journey.
Yeah, definitely. The curiosity I felt like was key. And just being open to talking to different people, talking to people in different areas, different product categories, and really just kind of taking bits of everyone's experience. And then just building that relationship. Those are still people that I go back to as mentors who I call when things are great, when things are not so great, and every place in between. Definitely staying curious and building your network were 2 things that really helped me and sparked the creative juices.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so important also, as a fellow business owner as well, that curiosity continues to flow even when you're in positions where you have more ownership of the outcome. But having that mindset of curiosity is undoubtedly really supportive in not only making the leap and making that transition, but also in building and growing and trying different things out. And I know we were talking about this in some of our prep calls, Erin, of, you try it and you see what works and you're going to see what doesn't work also, and remaining curious and open is so important in that. Sarah, what about you? Would love to hear a bit of your journey of how you went from corporate to starting your company.
Yeah, happy to share. So, my journey has been a little bit more dipping the toe in, I would say, instead of taking the plunge. So when I graduated from Lehigh, I was doing a lot of like weekend trips and taking advantage of very cheap flights to Europe. And so my friends convinced me to start a travel blog, which I grew at one point. It was over 50,000 followers on Instagram. I had brand partnerships right up until COVID was starting, which kind of put a damper in that. And I did a lot of vineyard visits and learned a lot about wine too when I was traveling because there's so much like good wine around the world. After that, so this was kind of on the side of my corporate job, I started an accessory business during the pandemic with luxury face masks, and then we expanded our product lines with my sister and my best friend. And we learned from that just like, I don't know, how to deal with consumer products, like customer facing brand, all the stuff that I had not had experience with in my finance roles. And so it really gave me a lot of exposure on like, how you build a brand with very little resources. Um, and I would also say just like even the corporate experience too, like I always kind of found ways to be in entrepreneurial spots within my corporate roles that um, kind of helped me prepare to this point. So then when I was doing my MBA, I started to get more into wine. I would just hop on a train sometimes from Barcelona and go spend the day with like a winemaker out in Penedès, which is the wine region that's outside of Barcelona. I also took like a wine certification class there and really networked a lot in the industry, kind of going off of what Erin was saying, like you just have to casually talk to a lot of people to see how it works. Um, and I got comfortable enough with it, my sister to do that. We realized like, hey, if we want to create our own wine label and bring it to the US and sell it online, it's something we could actually do. Um, but it just required like a lot of talking to people, see how other people have done it to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, Sarah, what I love about some of what you're sharing is you sort of have this amalgamation of different iterations of starting companies that all come together that form, this version of your entrepreneurial journey. And by the way, I'm sitting here listening to you talking, like, I can't wait for your retreats, your retreat center somewhere gorgeous that serves wine on beautiful rugs, with amazing, face masks and everything. We can really pull everyone together here. But the bits and pieces where you tried and iterated, and even though you weren't necessarily continuing with that same version of the company, I imagine there were plenty of lessons that you learned from company to company to company that are helping you grow and build today. And so I'm curious, like, are there any, if you're open to sharing, are there any kind of key lessons or key takeaways you took from the travel blog, from the accessory and cosmetics company? Like, what did you take from each one of those experiences that's informing what you build today?
Yeah, completely. So I think with the travel blog, one that was really helpful was like I didn't have anyone helping me. So I had to negotiate contracts with big brands when they would want to do a partnership. And so one I worked with is owned by AB InBev. And so that kind of gave me like insight into like the liquor industry, all the regulation with marketing there. Um, which has been helpful today. Even with like the accessory business, we were dealing with all the inventory ourselves, which was just like got really crazy. We also tested like different types of marketing, like influencer marketing. We got exposure to IP, which is super, super important. I think if you start any business today, like knowing how like trademarks work, making sure you're not infringing on anyone's by accident, all of that can get messy. So I think each one totally different lessons, but they've all kind of blended together where you try not to make the same mistakes twice. I would say you make new ones, but we've been able to take the learnings from
Yeah.
those and apply them now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much about entrepreneurship is being, to what we were talking about before with Erin, of bringing that curiosity, but then being willing to kind of get it wrong and then be scrappy about figuring out how to do it. And so I'd love, and Sarah, Erin, either one of you can answer this, but the question that I always get from people when talking about my business is like, how do you know how to do everything? And I know it sounds so simple, but when you are educated in a certain field and have had experience in a certain field, and then you go into entrepreneurship, you're sort of thrown into this world where, Sarah, like you said, it becomes branding, trademark, law, like all these different things and stuff. And I know both of you have international businesses, so there's also that international component. And so would love in the most like simple forms to understand, how do you figure out how to do all the things? And then what do you do when you feel stuck and you're like, I literally don't know. This is out of my wheelhouse and experience.
Yeah, I can take the first part of that. Google is your friend. So I think that I guess Google is your friend and Google is also not your friend. So for me, it's like you wear many hats as an entrepreneur. And that's something that I feel like everyone always told me is you are the CEO, the social media manager, the operations person, you become your own like legal consult of sorts. So for me, it was starting with like what I knew and then like trying to get educated through Google, or number two would be my network. And like when you don't know what you don't know, you pick up the phone, and that's where I would call someone in my network, or even like someone in my family who I think could point me in the right direction, and really just not being afraid to ask the questions and be like, look, I'm 1 month into starting this, or a year into starting this, or me like a year and a half, and I don't know what to do here. Like, have you been in this situation? And I think what's been really great is when you're talking to other people who have been through it, or you have some common thread with, like I've reached out to alumni. That's how Sarah and I got connected too. Everyone has an open to listen because a lot of people have been there and have had that same moment of, oh no, like what do I do right now? And I think you'll find that people are really willing to help you, especially when you kind of humble yourself and just say like, can you help me out here? If you don't know, can you point me in the direction of who does know?
Yeah. And that's so important, Erin. I think I remember when I was negotiating my first corporate contract, and it was I'd done this big pitch and I was so proud of myself. It was my first big corporate contract. And then they send the contract, they're like, have your lawyers take a look at this. And I had this moment where I was like, what lawyers? And then I had the next one, was
You
like,
are the lawyer.
what kind of lawyer do I need? And it was so simple because I was like, I'm doing this great thing. And then I was like, I don't have a lawyer. I don't even know which kind of lawyer to find. And that's where, like you said, relying on your network, doing some Google searches. And I think the important part of that I want to highlight from like a mindset perspective is being open to not knowing and not writing any meaning to not knowing, right? If I said to you, do you speak Japanese? And you said no, we'd be like, great. If I said, can you learn Japanese? You said, if I want to, yeah, absolutely. In that instance, when it's a skill, we put no meaning to not knowing. But oftentimes when we're trying to build and create, we say, oh, I don't know, I must not be cut out for this, or I'm not sure what to do. And it triggers all of our insecurities. But the reality is you just figure out what kind of lawyer you got to call. Sarah, would love to hear how you handle and navigate all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it comes like the networking is really helpful when you're starting it. I'd also say like Lehigh has awesome resources. They have an entrepreneurship program that helps with alumni, where like a lot of the basic things you would need to set up, I think are really useful there. One thing that's really intimidating, I would say with like the Googling is there's a lot of people trying to sell services to entrepreneurs that you might not need. So it can get really expensive to set up a business. So I think like sense checking that with like anyone you're networking with on like what you actually need
Yeah.
is important. The other thing that I think we've done well is we've picked the right partners that can help us like in the areas that we're not experts. And an example I have of this is so we get two of our wines from Slovenia, which is a small country next to Italy and Croatia. And there's maybe 15 vineyards out of over 20,000 that get their wine into the US. And there's very specific paperwork to export wine to the US from Slovenia and people even in the government there don't really understand it. And so we had to, like, luckily, our shipping partner knew a couple other vineyards in Slovenia that have shipped to the US. And so we had to like get this like whole group of people together to figure out like how to fill out this Slovenian paperwork. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think, yeah, picking the right partners is just huge because I think if you run across something like that, they at least have the network that you can pull off of too um, to solve the
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask Sarah, how's your Slovenian coming along? Um,
Not
but you're absolutely right. It's not only being able to discern where you need the help and when and how much help you need, but it's also being able to say, who can I trust and who can I bring in? And when you're building your own business, it becomes your baby in a way, and it becomes a big task to figure out where to bring in the right partners and how to know who the right partners are. Um, Erin, are you open to sharing? I know you've had lots of different experiences with different kinds of partners in business. Without going into the drama and the details of some of those dynamics, would love to hear a couple of the key lessons you've learned that have informed how you now look for partnerships,
Yeah.
by way of your experience in starting things up.
Yeah, I would say some of what Rachel's alluding to is when finding my suppliers, I'll use the phrase, I kissed many frogs. Um, so, to Sarah's point, where you really have to make sure that you have great partners, I think for me, a lesson that I'm trying very hard not to learn twice, that is the biggest lesson I learned last year in my first year of business, is trust your gut. So for me, in my corporate career, like I had mentioned, I was in buying. So I actually bought direct import furniture. So I was traveling the world, like China, India, Vietnam, Thailand, you name it. I was going to those countries with a team because I had huge Fortune 500 backing of Ross and Burlington stores to bring a translator and an agent with me to these countries to source and design product. And when little old me decided to go to Morocco and try to find partners, I didn't have a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 10,000 name. It was legitimately just me and my husband, who was like my security detail of sorts. So I think that was a lesson I learned too, is just know when you're starting out on your own, there's some things that you might unintentionally take for granted. And for me, going into a country, but having the same skill set without a company name, not the same thing when you're dealing in a lot of developing countries. But back to trusting my gut, I think intuition is something that speaks all languages. No matter where you are in the world, if your gut is telling you something is off, it's probably off. It doesn't matter what language they're speaking, what gender they are, what anybody looks like, what any cultural, socioeconomic dynamics are in play. Your gut is a really great check. And for me, I think being new into a business and going to Morocco and being eager to get started and being so allured by the beauty of these rugs and the story of the multiple generations who weave them, I think I silenced my gut a little bit and was like, okay, maybe this is just how things are, instead of being more persistent and asking some uncomfortable or just not even uncomfortable questions, but pointed questions. And now I like will speak to some of my business partners and they'll always ask me like how my gut check is feeling. And I think for anyone in any business, even if you're in the corporate world, even in like personal life, but especially in your entrepreneurial journey, really trust your gut and don't be afraid to ask questions, because if someone doesn't like your question and doesn't respond in a way that you like when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. I'm a big Maya Angelou fan. That's one of her like favorite quotes. And if they don't answer the question the right way, you're probably not going to like how they do business. So I wish I would have learned that a year and a half ago, but I'm all the
Yeah.
smarter for it.
Yeah, you are, Erin, and I think there's so much to comment on what you just shared, but I'm going to focus our attention on What happens when you're not paying attention to your gut a little bit? Because like you said, I love how you just said that your gut speaks many languages. Like you can feel things. Your gut doesn't speak in here's all the reasons why you should do this. It's a yes, it's a no, it's a gentle sound that kind of comes from your body that if you're not paying attention to it, you miss it and you'll let your brain kind of get in the way of it. And for anyone who's considering entrepreneurship, for anyone who's a new business owner, if you're just kind of flirting with the idea, I think something that's so important to understand is when you're doing something new, it's automatically going to activate like the brain part of you, right? It's going to activate the part of you that says how to, like good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no, pros, cons, because you're trying to learn something new and absorb more information. And that will often cut off your connection to your gut because there's sort of this disconnect or this dissonance between other people know how to do things more than I do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, or their knowledge or experience doesn't mean that they're right, especially for my business, for your business. So Erin, I imagine when you were talking to some of the weavers out in Morocco or the business people in Morocco, and they were saying, well, this is how we do things, the brain who's newly doing that, be like, oh, okay, this is how we do things. But the gut's like, well, that's actually not how I want to do things.
Yeah.
And so being really aware of that is such an important part of making choices for your business.
Mhm. And if you're gonna be in any sort of partnership with someone, it's a partnership, which means 50-50, some sort of collaboration. So even if it's how they do things, if they're not open to meeting in the middle of how you like to do things, they're not the right partner for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know you are in business with your sister, and that's a very different kind of partner. So I would love to understand a little bit about what drove that choice to go into business with your family, and then how that has influenced what you've created.
Yeah, completely. So Emily and I were two of the founders of the accessories business that I worked on. Um, and when we were working on that, we realized that we work really well together, which, if any of you have siblings, sometimes that can be surprising. So Emily's background is that she's a designer. So she's worked with like cybersecurity, like all these, I don't know, crazy things, but she also worked in sales at one point. So we have very complementary backgrounds. So, like I have some of the creativity, but Emily's like just like a tech whiz. Um, so it's been really interesting because we can own different parts of the business and it's really clear who owns what. And it's really helpful too because we know how to disagree in a respectful way that's not going to push each other's buttons. I think sometimes when you're starting with someone you don't know as well or a friend, it can be really tricky because disagreeing's hard. You don't want to fight. Things can sometimes get a bit passive aggressive, and we don't really have that issue. Like we just deal with the issue, it's done, we move on. Um, I would say that's like kind of our dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. And you bring such an important point of if you are choosing to start a business in partnership with others, or even if you're bringing in contractors or, like no matter what form you're bringing other people in your business, especially when you're at the beginning, you're figuring a lot out in partnership with other people figuring a lot out. And so being really conscientious about how you disagree or how you communicate when things aren't how you want them to be, knowing that one of the best parts about having your business is you can do whatever you want. But then that kind of breaks down a lot of rules where there's no one telling you how to do it. And sometimes that could be really disorienting because there's no one, you have no manager, you have no one saying, this is how you do it or this is the way. And so um, understanding what you're saying of like, how do you disagree or how do you approach each other? How do you connect when things are not how you want them to be is such an important thing to bring a lot of awareness to.
And I think the other thing to add too on that is something I've seen, a mistake I've seen other entrepreneurs make. And what's been helpful with Emily and my relationship is when you leave corporate, you're used to delegating to a team. And Emily and I both had that. And when you're working a startup, like if you're not doing it, the other person has to do it if you have a partner. And so, or you're paying someone to do it that's outsourced. So someone has to do it and you can't just delegate to someone that works for you. And I think an issue I've seen with some people that have started companies out of corporate is that they try to delegate to their partner too much in a way that's maybe like comes off where one person gets resentments or vice versa. And like with Emily, if I tried to do that with her, she's just like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not your employee, which is really helpful. But I think that can be like a hard conversation to have and an easy habit to slip into.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in starting your own thing, you sort of have to release that idea of ego, because on one hand, you've self-proclaimed yourself the CEO and founder of a company, so you promote yourself. But on the other hand, you've released all the resources, depending on the nature of what you're building. And so you are the person who's licking the stamps and sending the envelopes, and then you're also the person in the room pitching, and then you're also the person to, and so the sooner you can kind of relinquish that idea that like, that's not what I do, or that's not my role, net, it's your company, it's everyone's roles. And so being really aware of how you know, if you are in partnership, how you divide and conquer and support each other when one of the partners can't do something, or if you're doing it alone, how you know, say like, today I am the mail woman, and tomorrow I am the pitch, and the day after I'm coding. And that's what we're doing, or I'm, you know, weaving, fixing a rug. Erin, I remember you, one of the shipments got messed up, and I remember you were like, we're carrying rugs. And so, you know, I think that release of ego is so important. So important. Let's focus on the things you know now that you wish you knew before. So, Erin, would love to hear how you kind of think about that, of like, these are a couple of things I now know to be true for you.
Mhm.
And I wish I had a little more insight to that before I started all this. And I want you to talk about this both in the context of the business, but also in the context of being an entrepreneur. There's kind of two
Mhm.
pieces of that.
Okay, I'm gonna go a bit of a different avenue because the first two that come to mind are the trust your gut and like use your network. Another one that interestingly I was just talking to Rachel about the other day is think about how you're going to be working. So what I mean by that is everyone that's watching right now, you don't know me, but I am very chit-chatty, I'm social, I like love to walk around and like hang at the water cooler, like go get a coffee. Like I learn and get inspired by talking and engaging with people. And one thing I really didn't think of was that starting your own company where I don't have a business partner, I have, you know, vendor partners, I have people that help me with PR and marketing, it can be very lonely. And I just didn't think about the day to day of being in my house, my four walls, also a new mom, like figuring out where was I going to like get my energy and my excitement from, like have people to like bounce ideas off of or tell me like, Erin, that's crazy. Don't do that. Because sometimes when you spend too much time in your own head, you need like Sarah's sister Emily or someone to be like, don't do that, or like just to challenge you a little bit. So something I wish I would have thought about was just like what the day to day would look like. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about operationally what the day to day would look like. Who would help me set up my LLC? Who would come with me when I was going to these countries? How would I meet interior designers and go about pitching retailers or these developers or getting into like staging and high end real estate? And I didn't think about what that would actually look like in a physical sense. And it's interesting because in talking to other entrepreneurs, I hear a lot of the same things, and there's simple fixes for it. You know, do a different coffee shop once a week, find a WeWork. There's even like women only sorts of like entrepreneur startup networks that Sarah was even telling me about too. So I think that's something that's really important is if you're thinking of starting your own journey, and look, we just came off of COVID a few years ago, like everybody talked about how isolating that was. And in a way, when you're working at home as an entrepreneur, it can be similar. So just think about how you process, how you get ideas, how you get your energy, and what are some ways that you can kind of like get ahead of that.
Yeah. Yeah, Erin, that's such an important insight, because, and the word, you didn't use this word, but what was coming to mind as you were speaking was the idea of community. And it's not just, oh, I've got my friends and family community. It's, I have a really intentional community surrounding me, surrounding us, that I tap into, not just when you need help. Sometimes it's just like, can I just talk this idea out? I just need to say it out loud. One of my clients, actually, the other week, he's running for mayor, and he goes, well, have you ever rubber ducked something? And I'm like, what? And he said, in engineering, there's this concept where you put a little rubber duck on your desk and you talk to the rubber duck and you explain it to the rubber duck, even if you're alone. And it made me laugh because, so much of creating that community will really support you, not only in motivating you and helping you from a resource perspective, but also just playing off the energy of people. So, Erin, similar to you, I co-work with one of my sisters once a week. I've created, just to share some insight on that, and then Sarah, I want to hear some of your lessons. But I've created what I call my synthetic team, where I actually have a board of directors of different friends who are specialized in different areas, and they know this, that when I have a marketing thing I need to talk about, I call my friend Sam. When I have a confidence thing I need to talk about, I call my friend Erin. When I have, a branding thing. So I have friends who in their day jobs have all this expertise and all this wisdom. And I'm really intentional about who I connect with and when I bring them in, so that there's one steadiness in that community. So Sam always gets my branding and marketing calls. So she's steady and she's invested and she knows the evolution of it. But also you get people to bounce ideas with. And sometimes just talking it out does a lot in terms of energizing you. So I love that insight, Erin. I think it's really important. Sarah, what about you? What do you know now that you sort of wish you had known beforehand?
So, I think a couple things. One is even just like managing the PR of the business, especially for like consumer goods. With our accessories business, we didn't really have to try to promote it because everyone was at home, right? And online. And so it was really, and we got a lot of press really early, but it was more, I would say, like dumb luck than us doing something specific. That's been something that's been a big learning curve for me because it's very different than finance. And luckily, I've been able to connect with some female founders that are specialized in like different PR tools. And so they've kind of taken me under their wing and helped me a lot with like how should I be thinking through things. But it's kind of like I don't mind doing it, but it's a bit annoying because it takes a lot of time and it takes a really long time to see a return on it. Like if you do an interview, it will get posted 2 to 6 months after that interview to whatever publication it is. So you feel like you're putting a lot of work and using your limited time on something that maybe you're not seeing return on.
Yeah. And Sarah, how do you manage that now? Like knowing that you wish you had known that and you manage it now, like how do you find that balance between time spent and effort put in and then the timing of it all playing out, knowing you wish it all happened yesterday?
Yeah, it's one of it's like kind of like my after dinner project is like I set aside a certain amount of time every day to work on the PR piece because like when we have had like different press come out, it's been really good for the business and like we do see an impact from it and so it's valuable, but I try to like carve out a time that's not as busy that I can just focus on it and
Mhm.
then do it continuously.
Yeah. Okay, I want to pick up on the small, you said this kind of with a smile, and this wasn't the intention of what you said, but you said the after dinner work. Would love to hear from you, Sarah, and then Erin, you as well. I know you were alluded to this earlier, but would love to hear a little bit about how you manage your time, because I think that there's this conception that if you're going to start a business, you've got to be like rah rah, working all night, working all day, no breaks. Like there's this kind of energy in the tech space a lot of the time. And so I'm really curious, do you do that? Do you run your world a little differently? Like how do both of you engage in time knowing that you're the people building it? And if you're not doing it, no one's doing it yet.
I can start. So, I split my time between Madrid and then the US, usually Austin in the US. And actually what's tricky with our business and probably Aaron's too, is you're dealing with multiple time zones. So like a lot of our business occurs in Europe and then a lot of it in the US. And so Madrid's kind of a nice time zone because like Emily and I say we get more productive hours in the day because in the mornings we can deal with stuff that comes up here, afternoons we can deal with US stuff. And then if we want to take a break to do like a walk, go on a yoga class, grab lunch, it's possible to do it and you don't feel as rushed. I've noticed when I'm back home in the US, I feel a lot more rushed because, you have to wake up extra early to deal with everything from here. So for us, that's been a good way to get balance, but I do think it's really important to carve out every day, like something that's for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just won't do it and you'll end up very stressed out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get a little tactical on that. Like, do you work after dinner? Do you work weekends? How do you actually, what's the reality of your life?
I mean, lately, yes. Emily and I both try not to work too much on the weekends, but like when you have a customer facing brand, like you will get requests and we try to be pretty responsive, but we limit what we do on the weekends just because you do need to have some break.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's normal, right? If you're in a customer facing type business and you value that, and you're trying to build that trust in those relationships, especially at the beginning, being able to be present and responsive is so important. And taking those breaks, taking that time away is so important when you're trying to build and create and do something, because that's also where you get that blank space in your mind to be creative. And so much of building a business is tactics and building and growing, but so much of it is that creativity that you're bringing to not only what you're putting into the business, but to how you're running the show. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs burn themselves out really, really fast, because it's not just the time spent, it's the level of intensity in each one of those hours. And so that is something that I work on really consciously with the founders that I'm coaching, where we are really diligent about the time we are on and the time we are off, and knowing those inflection points of when we make exceptions of I'm off unless these two things happen. Because if you go on vacation for a week and someone says yes to the pitch and you don't respond for a week, depending on the nature of how competitive it is, the opportunity goes away. Erin, what about you? And I want you to give a before little James and then after little James, because I know there's
Yeah.
two versions that you're currently in right now.
I would say having a child makes you very efficient and very, selective. So I would say, pre-James, who's my son, I tried to keep it, like a pretty strict 9 to 5. What I'll say, being a business owner of one person, is when I get requests on weekends and emails on weekends, depending upon the nature of it, I do, like, scan and then do, like, am I answering this or can this wait till Monday? So I would say I definitely was like checking in. And for me, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier of like knowing how I worked, like I needed to be really structured with it of like, no, I need to treat this business as a 9 to 5. I need to give it that dedicated time because I felt like if I didn't have that structure and that mindset going into it, I can see where it becomes harder to stay motivated. So I made sure to keep it really structured. And now having a baby, one of the things I'll say that's great is, like I said, you get really efficient, and my time has a lot more to me value than anything. Like if I'm doing work and it means I'm not being a mom or with my son when like every day he's doing something new and I think it's like the greatest thing in the world, even though he's just like rolling over.
It's the greatest
I
thing.
really yeah, I
It is.
really
I'll
try to
give you
be
that.
really, really, like, present and really efficient. So right now, how I work is Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have help and I work like a 9 to 5 on my business, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the rest of the week, I'm kind of loosely checking in, but that's something where, to be honest, it's been a little bit of a challenge for me now of, like, kind of learning my boundaries and like what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing to not do. And it's tough. Like I know I've probably lost a client or two because I've been like, no, I'm sorry. Like I can't make an appointment. It's a 2 hour drive in Santa Barbara from where I live in California because I have my son that day and like I can't take him. But it's again the beauty of having your own company is like that's a choice I'm making. And I know what it would take for me to be able to do that. And I'm not at this point in life willing to do that. So being structured, and I'm just a lot more thoughtful with what I'm willing to do. And I'm a lot more transparent up front, where I'm like, this is how I work. If this, like, we're working on a custom project or we're designing something, I just always try to be really transparent with any limitations or time constraints that I have. And I also am transparent and explain to them, I have a 6-month-old at home. Like, I am from New Jersey. Shout out to the Jersey people I see in the chat. I'm from Homedale, and I will be going home this weekend in Monmouth County. Like, I am bi-coastal a lot. I'm potentially moving back to the East Coast to be closer to family. So, I know where I have limitations, but I also like have flown back to the East Coast to work with clients in New York and things like that. So I think just also being clear on where your lines are has been
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that boundary setting I'm hearing from both of you is so important. And what I hear in common for both of you, and I'm going to put myself in, is you have complete choice of how you run the show. And in some moments, in some phases of your life, in some phases of the business, you're going to want to dial up and be gung-ho running at it. And in other points, you're going to want to consciously take a step back and say, I need a bit of space. I need a bit of time away. And some of what that means is it has business implications. So, and I'm going to share one tidbit, and then we're going to open the floor for some questions here. But I made a conscious choice that towards the second half of the summer, there's a project I want to work on, which means I have to dial down taking on one-to-one clients. And so I have people coming to me saying, can you take me on? Can you take me on? Can you take me on? And I have to say no. And as a business owner, it feels really weird to say no to, like, cash in the door, someone I want to serve, but also recognizing I have a different vision and I need space and time to be able to focus on it. And that's something that to be able to emotionally regulate with is so important as a business owner, because your ability to sustain is one of the most, if not the most important part of you as a leader. Because if you run, burn out, don't take care of yourself, and this is not a push of like wellness, like, yes, wellness, I love it. But this is actually a push of thinking about what kind of life you want to live, what it takes to build this company into what you want it to be, and being open and flexible to know this isn't a one-year sprint. This is a multi-year journey that has to have some flexibility as you change, which you inevitably will. And so I think both of you captured that so well, of when you are willing to make those conscious choices to compromise and change. And Sarah, you living in a couple different places in any one year is amazing. So we will switch over to questions now. Morgan, I see a couple are here. Do you want to just guide us through a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. There were some coming in different areas, so I was just trying to put everything into the chat. So we will start. The first one actually is for Rachel from Alyssa. As you established yourself in your business, how did you define your services and start to brand yourself?
Yeah. So complete trial and error. So my background is I worked in investment banking at Morgan Stanley for many years, both here is in New York, and in London. I was over in London for 7 years, and then I was at Google in strategy for about 3 years before resigning to start my company or run my company full time. So I didn't know exactly what version of my business I wanted to do, because it's a service business. And so there's many different ways you can coach and support people. And so I really, really, really intentionally, and sorry, Lehigh University, was like, I am not following the rules here. I'm not building a business plan. I'm not doing it the way everyone's telling me I should do it. I'm going to try and play and experiment and see what version of this I want to do. So I actually spent over 1.5 years when I first started full time, blowing where the wind blew, and tried all different iterations of how to do things and why to do things. And the upside of that was I was able to experience a lot of different things and figure out what I actually do want to do and what the type of business I do want to build. The downside was I burnt out because I was always reinventing and recreating. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, I need to repeat. I need to scale, like get some leverage on myself. And so I was really intentional about letting kind of the world around me influence the services I built, and then trying stuff and liking it, and then trying stuff and not liking it and stopping doing it. In terms of starting my brand, welcome, I'm 4 years in, and I am now going through my first branding exercise. So my brand has just been me throwing spaghetti and sometimes placing spaghetti and seeing what sticks. I'm a really big believer in starting with the quality first rather than the brand first, depending on the nature of your business. But for me, it's been all about getting experience, honing my craft, building my skill, because there are especially be competitive in the coaching space, there are so many people who have amazing branding who are not actually trained coaches and who are not actually very good at what they do. And for me to build something that's sustainable, I have to start with the quality. So the brand is now being wrapped around what I'm doing now.
Awesome. Thank you. This I believe is for all of you. What are your top can't live without business tools, go-to softwares you use regularly as an entrepreneur?
I can share one that I've just started using. And if anyone on this call is like a social media or marketing wizard, please find me. I know Morgan is going to share her, like our Instagrams and LinkedIn's and emails. Like if anyone has expertise in that or in like the design world, please let me know. One that I am trying to do because I understand the importance of social media is Planoly. So it's a free app or there's a paid version, and you can schedule all of your content. So for me, when I talk about like being really efficient with my time, what I had been trying to do was taking like a day a month and scheduling all of my Instagram content from different photo shoots, from clients' photo shoots. And this is kind of where something I used to coach my team on in my corporate world was working smarter, not harder, especially when you're doing social media and you're building a brand and you're trying to be intentional with what you're creating. I find for me, it's easier to do that, to kind of look at it collectively. And I really liked using Planoly for that because you can actually see what your grid is going to look like. You can see like, okay, do I have enough reels? Do I have enough carousels versus like static posts? And I would just schedule it and then it would literally post it for me. You can schedule the date, the time, do all the hashtags, geotags. It links to Canva, which is the second software I would say that I use all of the time. For presentations, for branding. Canva is amazing. I will say using like the paid version, which I think is $14 a month, is really worth it. You can remove backgrounds on photos. You can change colors like on everything. It's far more advanced than the lay ladies terms that I'm using right now. But Planoly and Canva are what I would say.
Yeah. Sarah, what about you? Any incremental tools that you
Yeah,
recommend?
so I use Canva also. But I would say QuickBooks, and very nerdy. But it's really important because I think it, like, before you even start selling or spending money, I think it's really helpful to have all of your financial data in one place. It saves you a ton of headaches later on. So you don't have to do anything crazy with it, but I think that's really, like, it saves a lot of time. And the other one, I like Grammarly. Um, I don't know if you use it, but I used it in corporate a bit, but I still use it and it's great for our communications, especially because they have like an AI integration in there now. So if I'm dealing with like a lot of emails, I'm just too tired to reword it. I can tell it like what tone I want it to take and it will adjust it for me, which is great.
Love that. And I'm not going to share, I use all of those tools as well. I think the one thing, if you are a newer or budding entrepreneur, keep it scrappy. You don't need to like the learning of new tools takes a ton of your time. No one is investing in you because you're so good at using Canva, right? So if you are at the early stages, keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it light, and then start bringing in tools as you need to be smarter of how you work. But I'm saying that because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get really distracted by like, I have to have the perfect website and I have to have all my systems set up. I'm like, no, you have to go do your business. You have to go create sales. You have to go hone your craft. And those things, people get caught up in that because it feels safer and it's something you can like do. So that's my one like plug of like, definitely technology is amazing and it will absolutely help you, but don't get distracted in figuring that out. Focus as much as you can on like, what do you actually need to do to build the business?
Great. And I think we have one more question that we have time for. There are more questions, but I know that we do have a hard stop at 1. So we are going to head into one last question, and it is, what are ways you can gauge when you have a good enough foundation to leave what you know, what's been more secure in corporate, for example, to then launch into the entrepreneurial realm? How do we responsibly gauge when it's the right time without holding ourselves back forever?
I'll just say two quick things on this. I really struggled with finding the right time, and I probably heard it 100 times. There's never going to be a right time. Like when the risk of staying in your current position outweighs the like potential of what you could be going towards, like someone, Rachel, or someone who knows what I'm trying to say but can say it more articulately, like when you just can't deal with being comfortable anymore. Like there's never going to be a perfect time. You just at some point have to like put up or get out. Like you can wait till you have a certain number in a bank account. You can wait until, you have this person or your LLC filed. At the end of the day, you just have to do it. And there's always going to be a reason where you can be like, if I could just earn 6 months more of income, but you know what? The longer that you put it off, you're just putting it off. Just do it. Just do it. If you're thinking about it, do it.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree completely. I also think you kind of know in your gut. Like the other businesses I worked on, I never felt comfortable doing the full plunge with them, and with this one it felt right. So hopefully it was the right choice. But I think the other piece is you really need customer validation, and like I think a lot of times you become in love with an idea as an entrepreneur. So like don't be afraid to like go out and get a lot of feedback from people you don't know well, and get the opinions of people that won't hold back. Like even if it's harsh critical feedback, you need to hear it, because if you don't hear it from a friend, you're going to hear it from the market when your product's not selling. So
Yeah.
I would say validate your idea.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add two more pieces to that. I think when I was looking to transition, I I thought in very much of like, what am I waiting for? And I'd be like, oh, well, I want to make sure there's no other opportunities at Google that I could do coaching, or I want to wait until I have this amount of savings. I want to wait until this. So it actually took me like from the time I knew I wanted to do this to when I actually did it, a year and a half to fully resign. And in that time, I said, what am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? And I finally got to a point, I like remember this day, this moment was, what am I waiting for? And the only answer was I had to trust myself. And like I had exhausted all the other stuff. And so to me, it's really an exercise of self-trust. And the other piece, and I will be completely shameless about this, I worked with coaches, and I thought a lot about who I wanted to be in doing this, that I didn't want to quit and be like, this is crazy. Erin, I know you worked with coaches as well.
Yeah.
Building out the support to support the human that's creating the thing, it's super valuable, and it makes a huge difference. It allows you to bring a lot of awareness. Sarah, I don't know if you worked with coaches at all, but
Yeah.
yeah.
One other thing came to mind. You can always go back. You quit your corporate job. I still tell myself that on bad days. I'm like, I can always go back to my corporate job. Like if you need to, like what's the worst thing that happens? You take 6 months, you try something, and then you have an amazing experience. If it doesn't turn out to be exactly what it is, and you take that to interviews to, go back to the corporate job, like if the worst case scenario is going back to what you're already doing right now, you're already living in the worst case scenario if you think about it. Like that was kind of how I looked at it too, is like if this fails, I'll just go back to my corporate job, and like I don't care, I'll wait tables, I'll do whatever I need to do. Like there's jobs out there.
Yeah. So one final question. I know we're a little above time, but Erin, Sarah, I would love to hear. I know you are open to people reaching out to you. Would love to hear just how you would want people to engage with you. I'll share the same as well going forward. I know we have a bunch of people here who probably have more and more questions as we're talking. Sarah, what would be ideal for you?
Yeah, honestly, like, I don't know if you need any questions, like, or if you're thinking of starting something and want advice, I'm happy to provide some. I always get inspired more when I talk to other people doing their own thing. yeah, I'm just like open. So if there's anything that you're thinking of doing, like feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I would say the same. Follow me on Instagram. I'm going back to Morocco in September. You'll get to see how the rugs are made. You'll get to see the dyes, some of the beautiful homes that the rugs end up in, and beautiful stores. So at Erin Talgo Trading, and send me an email. Like, I'm in California, I'm in New York and New Jersey. I'm sometimes some places in between, but I'm always happy to connect. And I got my first corporate job from an alumni, and alumni are still helping me. So please send an email. I'm happy to pay it forward and probably learn a lot from you in the process too. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I echo all of that. Feel free to reach out to me as well. And I want to take this opportunity, Erin, Sarah, Morgan, to thank all of you. It's been such a treat to moderate and to gather all the insight and wisdom from both of you. And we look forward to all hearing from you.
Yes, this has been super inspirational. Thank you all. I know you are super busy, and for everyone that joined, thank you. I will be sending all the information that was put into that chat with all of their contact information in a follow-up email by the end of today, along with a survey for any feedback, or if you want to participate in something like this, and does not have to be this topic, but it can be anything. So always looking forward to hearing from our alumni as well. So you will be receiving an email, a follow-up shortly. And I just want to thank each of you, Erin, Sarah, Rachel, thank you. And everyone have a great day.
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.